Whenever and wherever men gather to talk about the best ever in Australian rules football, two names are bound to crop up with monotonous regularity. The names, of course, are those of Laurie Nash, the South Melbourne champion, and the great rover who wore the maroon guernsey of Fitzroy, Haydn Bunton. These two are accepted as having been the greatest of champions of the modern era. Even the old-timers who remain adamant in their claims that no players have bettered the calibre of Sid Coventry, Roy Cazaly, or earlier still, the legendary Tracker Forbes will grant that these two were champions. The fine records of both players speak for themselves. Bunton won the Brownlow medal 3 times, and Nash again and again performed feats of skill and strength that are talked about still. Both of them achieving these things when the standard of the game had risen to a height that stamps that era as the game's greatest. Both giving further indisputable proof of their great ability played in teams loaded with stars. In 1933, South Melbourne Premiership side, of which Nash was a leading member, being acclaimed as the greatest ever to represent that club, and the Fitzroy side in which Bunton played, boasting of 2 other Brownlow medal winners, a winner of the South Australian Award and also the winner of Tasmania's Premier Award. There is no doubt in the minds of most modern followers of the game that these two were Australian rules' greatest players of all times. But there is one question that no amount of argument among modern supporters can seem to solve. Who was the greater of the two? Many would point to Bunton. 3 Brownlow medals and claim that these make him the superior player, but that is not necessarily so. Certain it is that a player must possess outstanding brilliance to win Victoria's most coveted honour. But there are many fine players whose consistently high standard of play over a long period has made them better footballers than some Brownlow medalists. Take the case of Alan Hopkins, the brilliant Footscray and Victorian centre. Thrice runner-up for the Brownlow medal, yet never a winner of one. Surely his superb play in a team never high on the list accords him a place among the greatest. Think too of the reply of the great Checker Hughes, perhaps the mightiest of all football coaches. When asked who would be his number 1 choice if it were possible for him to assemble a team from among the outstanding personalities of the game's entire history, he said, Jack Dyer. Captain Blood, as you know, played for 19 seasons without winning a Brownlow medal. Again, a player may turn on 8 or 9 sizzling games during a season to win the medal, and for the rest of the matches play just a game. Whereas another man may play consistently brilliant, if not spectacular football throughout the season for his club. The fact that Bunton won not 1 Brownlow medal but 3, however over a period of 5 years, would indicate very strongly that the Fitzroy champion did not wear his laurel wreath of supremacy lightly, a thing to be tossed aside as the mood took him. It would appear that, in the vernacular, he was always there punching. It must be granted to Nash that, although Bunton had very strong competition among his own teammates, this competition came from a small select group. Nash, however, had to be content with such competition from a team whose every member was a champion and likely any week to turn on a blazing game that would dazzle the eyes of the game's most critical umpires. Nash and Bunton were vastly different players in the methods they used to make themselves the 2 noble exponents of the game they became. Bunton, roving, always following the packs, had the loping run of an Olympic miler. He was a good mark, and his ball handling was at all times deft and sure. Bunton also had a beautiful weaving evasiveness that carried him through packs with the ease of a ghost. The one blot on Bunton's game was his kicking, which did not possess the power consistent with a champion's game. The keynote of Nash's game were virility and tenacity. He was a tremendously virile player, whether playing either of the positions he starred, centre-half forward or centre-half back. In the air, Nash possessed only a slightly lesser degree of spectacular brilliance than one other player, his teammate, the amazing Bob Pratt. Despite his lack of inches, he climbed to dizzy heights. Nash was a beautiful kick and was accurate with either foot. Nash received the vote of that great coach, Bob McCaskill, as the mightiest all-rounder the game has ever known, as he also does those of Jack Dyer and Collingwood's famous Ron Todd. When Bunton left the game in Victoria, he went to Perth, and there he won the Sandover medal 3 times. This feat surely completing the making of him as Australia's most highly decorated footballer. Well, this is where we came in, and I think I can confidently state that the old question of Nash or Bunton, Bunton or Nash, has come no closer to gaining an answer than when we tackled it about 1,000 words ago.